NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks so much for staying tuned. And on the second leg of the program, we'll be looking at the impact of the 2019 Finance Act. On the 13th of January this year, President Muhammadu Buhari signed into law the 2019 Finance Act. Developments applauded in many quarters, given the derivative gains as it entails to other things promote fiscal equity, support small and medium enterprises, and reform domestic tax laws, aligning with global best practices. Small businesses with turnover less than 25 million naira to be exempted from companies' income tax. Furthermore, if a business makes between 25 million naira and 100 million naira in sales in a year, 20% company income tax will be paid instead of the usual 30%. We take this background report put together by Chimobi Walter Naji before we sustain the conversation.
The signing of the finance bill by President Muhammadu Buhari to make it a law was greeted with lots of accolades from experts who believe the provisions of the act is geared towards ensuring continued stability and protection of micro, small and medium enterprises in the country. The exemption of micro, small and medium enterprises with capital base of less than 25 million naira, they say, is a sure way to open up the informal sector and ensure incentives are given to encourage startups to grow from small to bigger businesses before being captured into the tax net.
Impose that company income tax on every entrepreneur, regardless of their profit margin, then the tax becomes regressive. But as this administration has rightly done, they've separated the taxable companies by earnings, those above 25 million and those below 25 million.
If you don't have an annual turnover of up to 25 million, you are exempted from registering and charging VAT. It doesn't totally remove you from VAT obligations, because when you are paying for service, goods or services, for those who have a turnover beyond that, you still have to pay if you're that SME that has that turnover below 25 million. So it doesn't entirely remove the burden, but it just lessens it.
How sustainable is this policy considering the vulnerable nature of the informal sector, and how can this policy be improved upon to ensure proper implementation?
If the government create an enabling environment for small businesses to be done, we need to encourage a lot of industry.
This reform also needs to be backed up or followed by a very clear database on small-scale businesses, medium and large. What they earn, who should pay, when to pay, how long will a small business stay before it starts paying taxes? How long will a medium-scale business stay before you classify it as large? All these rules need to be very clear.
As laudable as the Finance Act may be, some other respondents believe there are some concerns and challenges and the need for government to go beyond paper tax reform, especially with company income tax and value-added tax. In Abuja, I'm Chimobi Walter Naji.
Walter Naji's background on the impact of the 2019 Finance Act set the tone for the second leg of the program tonight. On set, I still have the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs, Ajuri Ngalale, and also Professor Kenife, Lead Consultant on Private Sector Development to the ECOWAS Commission. He's also a Microeconomic Policy Analyst. Thanks for staying on. Ken Okoa is still with us. He's expert on regional economic integration, trade lawyer, and ECOWAS consultant. Thanks for staying on. And just joining us on the second leg of the program is Tefa Abraham, investment and financial expert. Thanks for joining us afresh on the program.
Thank you very much.
Quickly, let me allow a jury to give us a brief perspective as much as the reports have set the tone.
Thank you very much. Yes, Omini. The finance bill is the result of very wide consultation, and obviously the details have been out for some time, increasingly so as time has gone on, laid out by President Muhammadu Buhari during the laying of the 2020 appropriation bill last October. Now, I think what is of most priority to our people is going to be about how this financial bill, which was signed into effect on January 13th, is going to affect their lives. We know that within this bill, the value-added tax has been increased from 5% to 7.5%. We also know that as a result of President Muhammadu Buhari's concern for the most vulnerable segments of our population, he included a wide kind of segment of exemptions that would be put in place to protect most Nigerians from the effects of the VAT increase. Obviously, that would include new items that are, all fruits and vegetables, all meats, you name it, rice, wheat, cereals, even locally manufactured sanitary pads to encourage local production, for example, and it goes down the line. Almost every staple food item that most of our families consume on a daily basis have been put in that on that list to protect our people. Now, in terms of business, because this administration has put so much work, I know I just talked about the ease of doing business and some of those efforts, we put in so much work to try and encourage the development of micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises, and we don't want to reverse that now with any kind of undue tax regime. So what has been put in place is a new threshold that would ensure that every micro and small enterprise that is achieving or turning over an annual profit of 20 million naira or 25 million naira or less will not pay company income tax, CIT. They will be exempted also from VAT as well. Now, the medium-scale enterprises, which are enterprises that turn over between 25 million naira and 100 million naira, would see the rate of company income tax that they were paying before be cut. So most, when you talk about micro and small and now medium enterprises as well, you're talking about over 90% of the enterprises in the country. And you're going to now see for the medium enterprises a reduction in CIT from 30% down to 20%. Now, in terms of the large enterprises, those enterprises that are turning over an annual profit margin of 100 million naira or more, they are now going to just continue, instead of increasing, they're just going to continue paying 30% company income tax. But I think what is most exciting and really what has not gotten a lot of press lately is the fact that a new clause was put in place by President Muhammadu Buhari, which essentially says that no matter the size of your enterprise, small, micro, medium, or large, if you are involved in any aspect of agricultural production across any value chain in the agricultural production sector, you have an opportunity to take advantage of a new clause that would essentially exempt you from payment of company income tax for a period of 5 years. We are so determined to diversify this economy and produce what we're eating and also export that we are putting that in place to encourage agricultural production. And also, not only are we giving a 5-year exemption of CIT for any size enterprise involved in agricultural production, we're also ready to renew that by an additional 3 years once it's been proven that you have continued to participate effectively and fully in the agricultural production space. The last thing I would just mention is we understand that tax compliance is a very, very important aspect of sustainable economic growth and development, and ensuring that we're able to shore up the kind of internal revenue generation that will enable us to fund our budgets in the future without borrowing. So what we've done in terms of tax compliance within the finance bill has been to put in a new stipulation, a new bonus stipulation, which basically says that any enterprise, if you're, for example, a medium-scale enterprise and you're paying 20% CIT as opposed to 30% before, that if you pay your taxes, you remit what is due to the tax authorities within 90 days before it's due, we're ready to give a 2% bonus in CIT reduction just to encourage early tax payment, early tax compliance. Now, if you're a large enterprise turning over 100 million naira in profit or more every year, then we're willing to give a 1% bonus in CIT reduction for early early tax payment as at when due within 90 days. So these are all the new innovative measures that Mr. President has put in place to ensure that not only are our businesses now having a kind of level of predictability that they didn't have before in terms of the business environment, investment environment, but now we're also incentivizing the process of tax compliance and tax payment. And we think that that's going to pay dividends moving forward as we restructure our economy towards internal revenue generation as opposed to singular oil and gas import-export business.
Okay, before I go to Tefa and Ken Okoha, let me take on Professor Kenefe. Let's also look again at the strategic objectives of the Act that include raising government revenue through various fiscal measures, promoting fiscal equity by mitigating instances of regressive taxation, and introducing incentives for investments. Beautiful. What if the safeguards are not properly put in place? What happens?
There are safeguards, and in fact, I have to tell you that there are more gains in terms of tax, not just from the VAT, but for the rejigging, all the changes that have in the petroleum tax laws. A lot of money is coming out from there. I know you expect between $500 to $800 million this year, but next year and subsequent years, it will be well over $1.5 billion. But two things that hit me on this. One is corporate group headquarters of companies have been shying away from Nigeria for a very long time. And it's because of double taxation. Now they've removed that. The practice has been they go to Dubai and other low tax constituencies and put their group headquarters there. And they do transfer pricing. Africa loses $84 billion on transfer pricing, Nigeria over $8 billion. And what it means is that oil companies or big companies, multinationals, they will invoice their head office, high group office somewhere, and then they manipulate the price of their import and export from Nigeria to transfer the value or to their offshore company. But now these companies are now free to come here and they will make money. And there's a difference. When you are on one business, you are also looking around and seeing other businesses. Siemens was doing more of telecommunication, now they're in power. And then, the more you look, the more you see. So opportunities. Then the second one is the impact, the economic impact on small businesses. When you set a benchmark, people rotate around that benchmark. There are about 42 million SMEs in Nigeria, accounting for about 90% of our employment and about 92% of our employment and 90% of the number of businesses. But in terms of GDP, they are about 48.8% of our GDP. Now, our GDP is about now 500 billion. So you can now see about 250 billion of that money is coming from MSMEs. Now, if you are looking at a threshold of $1 million, 1 million naira for tax purposes and VAT purposes, take that as an average. Multiply by the 40 million that are the small and micro. That gives you 40 trillion naira, $130 billion. Now, that is about half of that half. Now, can you imagine? Don't forget about the 25 million when we get there. Imagine in the next 4 or 5 years, that average moves from 1 million to 10 million. Do you understand what I'm getting at? Do you know the impact? We will now have a contribution to GDP of 400 trillion naira, which is about 1.2 trillion. Now I can see a pathway for Nigeria to actually arrive at this dream that by 2030, our GDP could be 1.764 trillion, and by 2050, it will be 6.4 trillion. So you can now see a pathway. So the question is this: how rapidly can we increase that average turnover? And then what are the conditions, binding constraints that we have to take off? Of course, we know the infrastructure. The more power that we can deliver, the quicker that they will rise to that level. So I can see a clear pathway. It was difficult to say this. So this finance bill has opened a lot of avenues. And also, it has consolidated most of the recommendations from the ease of doing business, which you know over the last 4 years we've been having incremental progress. So much of the recommendations on how to handle it is being implemented and captured in the finance bill. So the greatest thing, winner, is not just the government, the states and local government that are getting extra money to pay the salaries, but these people can earn their money, keep the money, and reinvest it. Because the banks are not investing in the real sector. So they now have opportunity to grow the business. By the time it gets to 25 million, they can start a second business. By the time so that will have changed the equation in this country with this finance bill.
Okay. Tafa, you are very visible in the background report, so I'll come to you as much as you're just coming in. Ken, I know very well when the issue of eco-currency got heated up. You are the president of the National Association of Nigerian Traders, and you're also a trade lawyer. There was a huge memo you did to the president, ECOWAS, and what have you. With this 2019 Finance Act, what happens to your constituency? Is it good riddance, or is it going to nip you guys somewhere?
Thank you very much, Omni. Quite frankly speaking, the same day we met over this particular subject matter of ECO was the same day we met on the Financial Act. And I think if there is something to commend this administration for, this is one of the innovations. And we came to agree that although there's no law that does not have its perhaps little imperfections, this is a law, and therefore it can be amended, it can be improved upon with time. But for the president, I'm not holding brief, I mean, jury is here to do that, but for the president to have that courage to get into this, I think kudos to him. Now, having said this, there are key issues that we looked at. One, the opportunity created by this act to increase the tax net. That's one. Two, is the opportunity to also remove and exempt the small and medium enterprises from such a heavy tax burden. That's number two. Number three is the consumer populace that has also have had their shoulders laden with numerous taxes and then the VAT, and at this time consumables. A major chunk of food and consumables were also removed from the VAT. That's a great one. Number four is that it has also created an opportunity for revenue increase, so that, you know, what we'll be having every year, you'll be having budget deficit, and then we are borrowing. And some people have been condemning the act of borrowing. The act of borrowing is because we're having shortfalls. But because we are increasing that latitude, that tax net now, we are therefore increasing also the revenue base. However, I think that there are a few dots that we need to look at. One, now that we are going to have more funds in our pockets as a government, as a people, are we going to reduce the borrowing so that there will be a reduction in the future encumbrances of the people? Yeah. That's number one. Number two, can we have a people, a society, call themselves a society, call them non-state actors, that will be able to open their eyes and see this increase in the volume of revenue? How do we watch so that while President Buhari is there sitting over there, these funds are going into the hands of administrators? Can we monitor them? Number three, there are governors. A major chunk of this VAT will be going to the states. And permit me to say this. Many of our governors, unfortunately, are emperors. Do we have people who are capable, civil society organizations, CBOs, who are capable at the state level there to monitor and to ensure that these funds in the hands of governors are heading towards development of the states, so that people will not be looking at the federal every time? Number 5, the local governments also have funds coming in. Can the emperor also release its grip on the local government administrations so that they can freely also develop from that angle? Because if you don't create that pyramid of development, we will go back to the land. I think I should stop there.
Okay, Tefa, shortcuts. How rapidly? What happens to regulations like he has touched across the 3 states? What happens?
Okay, basically, I'll just pick up from where he stopped. Nigeria's fiscal system is like a pyramid. In terms of revenue sharing, we have the federal government at the bottom, the states at the middle, then the local government with the small triangle at the top. But in terms of potentials, where resource is concentrated, the local government actually at the bottom, next to the state, then the federal government at the top. Picking from where he stopped, in terms of regulation and ensuring equity in resource spread, we must, as a country, empower the people, the bottom of the pyramid, where the resource is concentrated, to be able to generate, to be independent enough to generate resources that will contribute to the center. The way it is right now is that the whole of the SDGs, for instance, will not be achieved if the local government is left out. But unfortunately, the local government that has the highest potential for internal generated revenue are all relying on states for handouts, and the states themselves on the federal government for the monthly allocation they get from Abuja. But if we empower the local government to ensure that they are able to generate, to boost their capacity for internally generated revenue, we will see that fiscal structure being rearranged. But if you take before I came for this program, I looked at the 36 states budget in terms of revenue, how much they generate from pay as you earn, from revenues from MDAs, from road taxes, other taxes. I realized from the chart that the pay as you earn, taxes from pay as you earn is about 56% for states. So Nigerian states are still civil service dependent. Taxes at the subnational level for Nigeria is still pay as you earn. It comes from those those with government jobs and the pay as you earn that they get from them. All these states, especially at the local government level, are relying on just handouts. Again, if you look at the federal level, we have the National Assembly to ensure that the legal framework that is needed to empower any reform of the federal government is put in place. At the level of the state, we have the state houses of assembly to ensure that they work with the state executive to provide the counterpart of what the federal government is doing. For instance, the ERGP for the federal government, the state will ensure that working in synergy with the state assemblies, there's an ERGP for the states, but we don't see the state replicating what the effort the federal government is putting to ensure that the country grows. The 10.59 trillion we have as federal government budget is just federal. To get federation budget, you have to add all the expenditure from the states. So the state needs to also sit up to complement what President Muhammadu Buhari and his team are doing up here in the center. Then at the local government level, there is local government council. They play the regulatory role of, let me say, National Assembly and State Assembly. But they have become like committee of people that the state governors just like. Borrowing from me again, having that posture of being emperors. So through fiscal restructuring, which I'm not defining it in a very complex manner, but in a simple manner of local government waking up to realize their power, the potential they have to contribute to growth, using the local government council to provide the needed framework, complementing what the state is doing through the state assemblies, and then what the center is doing through the National Assembly. This is the kind of regulation we hope to see that will drive this country to achieve that high growth that the president alone cannot achieve if the local government and state don't join. So regardless of party differences, they must be one in economic thinking. If you recall, during the time of National Economic Empowerment Development Strategies, there was seeds for state economic empowerment development strategy, and there was leads, local government economic empowerment development strategy. For the ERGP, where is it? Why don't we hear local government ERGP, state ERGP, just like we have at the federal government? So the federal government right now, with the henchman being President Muhammadu Buhari, is running optimum, is running very fast, but with the kind of developmental load behind him, IDPs, refugees, insecurity, job creation, growing population, the effort will not be commensurate if the states don't join in pushing. So it's really important now that we're in this 2020, long-awaited 2020. The states and the local government need to join hands with the center.
Before I allow the SSC to respond, let me take two issues now on Ken Ife and Ken Okoha. Now, Professor Ken Ife, I see the issue of market forces mechanism here playing out in terms of behavioral mechanisms, trade, and the consumer behavior. If we don't watch it, can it alter it? In terms, for instance, given what is up on ground now, could there be, in terms of consumer behavior change, the trader behavior change?
Okay.
How do we manage that?
Now, we do need consumer credit explosion, so that people will stop having to pay cash for everything. It's a cash economy. You want to buy a house, you bring cash. You buy a car, you bring cash. If we have credit, then we can use hire purchase, we can use leasing, and then, we can get with 10%, drop 10% to drive off a car, 3 years, you bring it back and bring it back, so, something like that. But second perspective to your question is, when you look at GDP, you can have primary sectors, agriculture, industries, and services. But there's another way of looking at GDP by composition. Now, you look at household consumption is about 84% of GDP. Now, investment is the next one. Government consumption is only about 5%, 5.7%. Then the investment is less than 10%. Now, the household consumption is critical, because the problem we have two problems. If money flows to the market, capital flows to it is best for people to borrow from the market. That is the best way to borrow. But what happens is that when you go to the market, the people who get the money are the traders, and they use it to import. And that's why you find the likes of central bank reluctant to lower the interest rate, because it will just be hijacked by traders and they start importing. And then what does that do to inflation? Then it doesn't actually go into production. Okay. Because if it goes into production, then everybody will be laughing, because the flow of fund going into production means that, because it needs to tie it to household consumption, which is about 84% of the consumption. Whereas on the other side, the weakest link in our economy is the link between agriculture and industries. Agriculture is 22%, industry is 22%, and the service industry is 56%. Now, because of the weak link between agriculture, primary agriculture, and industry, what we grow is not being processed. So what happens is that what we grow as crops flow out through our borders. And when it is leaving, it's causing inflation, because you have demand pull inflation. And the reason it's going is because our currency has dropped. If 1 naira used to buy for 3 francs, now it's buying 1.5. So our food are cheaper. But 3 months after that, in dry season like February, March, those same food grain that we left here, 50,000 naira per ton, soya beans, rice, all that, they will come back at 150,000 naira per ton, 300% increase over a period of 3 or 4 months. So, and it becomes imported inflation. It becomes a cost push inflation. So on both counts, the food, you look at the inflation, core inflation is always less than 10%. It's about 8.6 to 8.8% for a long time. And the rural and urban inflation and rural inflation, they are all around 10%. But the food sub-basket index is 13.78 going up. So that's what is pushing the inflation, keeping it up. Do you get the connection? Sure. Yeah. So, the disconnect is just the fact that our raw material, 30 to 70% of what we produce never make it into the food chain because of post-harvest losses. If we are processing them, we will deal with the issue of border transferring our jobs being there, and then we're also dealing with the containing inflation. So in both counts, the traders are not that helpful in that respect.
To him.
They're not that helpful.
Before I allow the SSC to react.
When I was in the board of one of the microfinance banks, of course, I was beginning to look at what is going on at the microfinance level. And I look at what is, they are lending at 3% a month, but who are they lending to? They're lending to traders. Because only traders who can pay 3% a month, which is 36% a year, because they use it to import and buy and they buy and sell. Manufacturers can't borrow that kind of money. So we have that, it's something that we have to sort out with Ken. And
yeah, that's what I'm going to him now. Ken, now with what you activated a direction in this whole discourse, and now coming back to you, what are you doing to conscientize your platform so that they are properly carried along on all this, to avoid the fears Professor Ken has raised?
I think that fear is already allayed. I mean, it's already reduced, so to speak, by this particular act. And I'm going to tell you how. And that's one of the reasons why we say that this act is quite innovative. In her own wisdom, the presidency looked at this and removed VAT from agro-business, agro-food, if you like. Okay? What would that do? Of course, that would go a step further to reducing food import bill of the nation. You know why? Because there's going to be more investments in that sector now. Because people are no longer going to pay more taxes. And of course, if you look at the nature of SMEs, they want to go to where they are not going to be, just so much. And don't forget, the 3 necessities of man, essentials: food, housing, and clothing and shelter. Now, if on food, you have reduced the burden of tax, and even before now, Nigeria is moving towards self-sufficiency in some commodities, essentially rice. We'll come to that. It means that capital flight, as regards that particular component, that sector, that particular value chain, has dropped. So the government is now raking such funds into the system again and motivating the private sector to invest more in that particular sector. Again, one other thing is that, for some time now, we have started this subject of campaign on made in Nigeria goods. And before that time, the problems with dollars, the exchange rate problem, at a point, created a bigger one for traders. They were not seeing dollars to buy. And even when they see the dollars to buy, it was so high. Therefore, when you look at how much you are going to buy and how much you're going to buy dollar, and then go fly to Dubai and fly to to Europe, fly to the Asian tigers to import, you are dissuaded already. So people looked back to local substitutes. And because of that, we had that system of, getting back more investments in the local economy. So that fear of our funds going out again, absolutely. Even with the closure of the border, people are adapting to it. So I think these are things that are working together. The policies are gradually, it may be unwitting, but gradually they are all coming together to process a nation that we want. Whether they are palatable at this time or not is another thing. But ultimately, all of these things are going in the right direction. And don't be afraid. The traders want something that will exchange and get them more funds into their pocket.
Thank you very much.
It is not.
Now, federating units, competitiveness between the public and private sector. Are we going to reduce borrowing? I'll take that to Ajuri. But quickly, what should the youths be doing? They cry so much about jobs. What's the space for the youths before the SSA will respond?
Okay, in the context of what the current administration is doing, especially this Finance Act that is out now, what this Finance Act does is to make it very clear that principally through taxes, VAT, value-added tax, personal income tax, capital gains tax, company income tax, and also some palliatives for small and medium-scale enterprises, there will be opportunities that will be opened up. What macroeconomics does is not to directly attempt to create jobs, but to provide a conducive environment for people with ideas, those who have some level of innovation, to take advantage of, to see what they can gain from the system. So in the context of ICT, infotech, youths with the smartphones, with all the Twitter and Instagram, need to see how they can buy into the investment space that the Nigerian economy is opening up through the digital economy. Then secondly, this current administration is not just allowing job creation to be determined by market forces, what economists like to call invisible hands. They're also making deliberate efforts to ensure that they provide jobs through the social investment program, through the N-Power and through many other schemes. So youth must first of all know what government is doing. Youth must be interested in government program. There are a lot of windows out there, even from the central bank, that youth, if organized, can have access to credit to invest in. But many youth today don't really follow up with what government is doing. And I won't blame them. The National Orientation Agency have to package government information about businesses, access to finance and credit, and take it to where these youths are, which is the social media space. Package this information in a way that they can access it and take advantage of it. That's for youth. That's just it.
Okay. Yeah. Huge bag of concerns raised. Can you handle them?
Thank you very much. I think first and foremost, obviously, it comes down to an appreciation of the fact that we are a country that is faced with decades worth of deficits. I mean, that's the reality. We can't run from it. It's not an APC or PDP issue. This is a Nigerian issue. This is the reality we have. Now, digging out of that and implementing long-term solutions that are going to be able to not just dig us out of it, but also ensure that we never go back to those deficits is something that does not happen overnight. And the nice thing is that in our consultations with the Nigerian people across radio, social media, etc., they're very clear-eyed about this. They're very realistic about this, and they're very cooperative about this. What they just want is to have an open door and an ear, to ensure that they're being heard and that their contributions actually have a tangible impact on government action. And that is something that we're committed to doing, and we have been doing that certainly in recent months in particular. Now, I think it's important for us to look tangibly at we talk about restructuring. And you know, during the last election campaign cycle, there were so many different definitions given to the notion of restructuring that nobody really understood what restructuring really was in the end of the day. What Mr. President has done, though, is he has taken tangible steps toward actual restructuring, particularly in the fiscal space, that I think Nigerians have seen and commended. First and foremost, I would mention, obviously, the implementation of the new Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, NFIU guidelines, which have now ensured that for the first time in decades, that local governments are receiving the funds that are due to them direct from the Federation account, bypassing the state governors. This is something that is verifiable. This is something that we are now on a monthly basis putting those allocations online so that every Nigerian will be able to see exactly what his or her local government is earning on a monthly basis. These are the things that will give our people the tools to be able to hold public administrators to account at all levels, which is what is required if we're talking about youth employment, if we're talking about building infrastructure at all levels, if we're talking about some of the economic restructuring that all of us desire as a country. So we have started the process, and we just ask our people to please be patient with us and to monitor the progress we're making and ensure that that progress is sustained and ensure that whatever we are promising, that we are held to account for those promises across sectors. I think our people are showing a zest in doing that, and we're going to continue to engage with them. So I think ultimately there's no secret sauce, there's no magic wand. The first thing we have to do, we have to diversify our economy away from oil and gas. We have started that process in a major way by obviously ramping up agricultural production, for example, bringing down our food imports, getting really close now to meeting local demand so that we can now export and all of that and really rejig the ratio between oil and gas exports and the exports of other commodities. We're on the path of doing that. Now, the second leg is ensuring that we build the infrastructure, right? Even if it's with borrowed money. There is smart borrowing. We are borrowing intelligently. We are borrowing for infrastructure. We put that infrastructure on the ground. Guess what happens? Cost of production goes down. The cost of producing energy, the cost of logistics, you name it, all the costs go down. That encourages investments. That brings in the factories that employ our people. Once you've employed your people, now you're looking at expanding the tax base, and now all of a sudden you have a sustainable developing economy that's not dependent on the vicissitudes of a global oil price. So these are the things that are going on right now, and I think Nigerians are looking around the country and they can see tangibly new airports coming on stream, new seaports that are being constructed, both dry and wet. They're seeing new roadways being constructed. They're seeing all of these things going on, new bridges and all of that. So all of this is happening. Nigerians are seeing it. We're just asking our people to be patient with us and to continue to hold us to account.
I must say thank you, gentlemen. It has been a loaded night, starting with Ajurin Galale, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. It was nice having you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And I reserve you the best for the better. Happy New Year.
God bless you and Happy New Year to you and to all Nigerians.
Tefa Abraham, investment and financial experts. Thanks for being on the program.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Professor Kenny Faye, lead consultant on private sector development of the ECOWAS Commission. It was nice having you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Ken Okoa, very strategic to the last topic. Thanks for the program, for being on the program.
Thank you so much.
And to our viewers, those who put in their calls, those who send in their tweets, thanks so much, and forgive me if I didn't take your tweet tonight. That's it on Tuesday Live tonight. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.